If you're a serious history buff or a survival-minded prepper, you'll appreciate this one. Before we get into the meat of this guide, hit that subscribe button for more deep-cut historical survival tactics you're not getting anywhere else. Now, let's start with something that hooked me the first time I came across it. During the Second World War, long before modern ultralight gear and insulated sleeping systems, soldiers in the harshest fronts figured out a way to sleep warmer than many campers do today. And they did it without a sleeping bag. One simple trick, devised out of desperation, refined by experience and passed quietly through units, kept men alive when temperatures dipped low enough to kill an unprepared man in hours. It's a tactic overlooked in most mainstream histories, yet profoundly useful for anyone studying fieldcraft, cold weather endurance, or the practical realities of soldiering under brutal conditions. The opening secret lies in how soldiers use the earth itself as insulation. One of the biggest misconceptions is that surviving the cold is all about piling insulation on top of yourself. Soldiers who fought in places like the Ardennes, the Don River, and the Italian Apennines learned quickly that the real threat was the ground beneath them. Bare soil, especially frozen soil, pulls heat out of the body at a rate far more dangerous than cold air. So, men who lacked proper bedding or whose sleeping bags had frozen stiff began cutting shallow trenches just big enough for their bodies. They filled the bottom with whatever dry material they could find: pine boughs, straw, torn clothing, even paper rations boxes. This wasn't comfort, it was survival. By lifting themselves even a few inches off the raw earth, they reduced conduction enough to make the difference between shivering all night and getting a workable rest. You can apply this today. If you ever find yourself stuck overnight in the cold without any gear, just remember you can dig a shallow body-length trench and fill it with dry insulating material. Even in an urban setting, using cardboard layered underneath you works shockingly well. The process is simple, really. Scrape out a depression, add any dry filler you can gather, then lie in with your back protected from heat loss. The next part of the trick comes from trapping warm air using clothing rather than relying on blankets. Soldiers who spent nights in foxholes simply couldn't afford to sleep exposed. What they realized was that layering tight to the skin was actually the enemy. Instead of bundling up in every garment they had, they kept an inner layer dry and loose enough to trap warm air. Outer layers stayed just snug enough to prevent drafts, but not tight enough to compress the insulation. This created a micro-environment of body-heated air that acted like a primitive sleeping bag. Men who wore everything tightly often woke soaked in sweat, which then froze and made them colder. Those who layered properly, though, stayed dry and warmer. Applying this today is, well, pretty straightforward. When bedding down, you want to loosen your clothing just a bit, especially around your chest and legs. If you only have one coat, wear it, but leave it just unzipped enough so warm air can expand without escaping. If your clothing is damp, take off the wettest layer and put it at the bottom of your trench bed. Let it dry out from the warmth radiating downward. You know, a soldier freezing on the Eastern Front didn't have Gore-Tex, but he did understand airflow, and that principle still matters. The most overlooked element of the World War II trick is the heat cycling technique soldiers use before lying down. Before sleep, men performed what we'd now call micro-exertion cycles, short bursts of movement designed to warm the core without sweating. Things like squats, slow push-ups, controlled breathing and bracing, or short marches in place. These weren't workouts, but deliberate heat priming. Once warm, they immediately settled into their insulated trench, trapping that heat before it could dissipate. This gave them a head start against the cold and prevented the numbing drop in body temperature that happens when you lie down, chilled. This is still extremely effective. Before bedding down on a cold night, give yourself about 1 to 2 minutes of low-intensity movement. Not enough to build sweat, just enough to make your torso feel warm. Then settle into your insulation and slow your breathing. Modern survival instructors still teach the same principle, but soldiers figured it out long before anyone formalized it. Another key part of the technique was using improvised wind barriers rather than relying on body heat alone. WWII soldiers often slept with their ponchos or shelter halves stretched just above their trench. Even 6 inches of overhead coverage dramatically cut wind chill. The coldest nights weren't the calm ones. They were the windy ones. So, soldiers improvised micro-shelters that broke the wind without trapping moisture. They used brush, scrap wood, even ammo crates to support their coverings. The goal was simply to stop the wind from stripping off the thin layer of warm air around their bodies. In a modern context, the same rule applies. If you don't have a tent or sleeping bag, all you need is a barrier. Anything from a tarp to a jacket propped over 2 rocks. You're not trying to build architecture, you're trying to block airflow. That one principle alone changes the entire thermal equation. What makes this World War II tactic so powerful today is its simplicity and reliability. No batteries, no ultralight gear, no reliance on synthetic insulation, just an understanding of physics, body heat, and how the environment interacts with the human body. Every soldier who survived winter campaigns learned these rules by experience. Today, preppers, survivalists, and reenactors can still use the same principles because they work in any climate, with any level of equipment, under almost any conditions. If you want to experience this for yourself, try it under controlled circumstances. Go out on a cold night with nothing but your regular clothing and a shovel. Dig a body-sized trench, line it with dry leaves or pine boughs, and build a small windbreak with a poncho or tarp. Warm up with a minute of movement, then lie down. You'll feel the difference instantly. It's a direct connection to the ingenuity of World War II soldiers, and it's a skill worth mastering. If you found this valuable, make sure you subscribe to The Prepper Historian and share this guide with anyone who appreciates real historical survival knowledge.